Just checking my stocks, and I've made more money from Elon Musk in the past year than from anything else. If you count stock appreciation and stuff I do on X, like the subscription to Dilbert, etc. So stocks are up a little bit, but not all of them. The S&P 500 is down a little bit. A little bit. You'll hardly even notice. All right, let's get the comments going. There we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens right now. Go. Sublime. Well, I wonder if there's any sketchy science that says that coffee is good for you. Oh, yeah, there is. Thanks to the Daily Coffee News, who I suspect is an organ of Big Coffee. So you can trust them totally. A diet rich in foods containing polyphenols, of which there's a lot in coffee, can dramatically reduce the risk of metabolic syndrome, which is a major risk factor for heart disease. So if that sip of coffee made your heart feel better in a variety of ways, that's not an imagination. Yeah. What enjoying the simultaneous sip can make your heart feel better. Well, it's a scientific fact according to Big Coffee. Did you know that egg prices have plummeted 12.7% this month, according to the Gateway Pundit? I'm glad somebody's watching the price of eggs. You know what's the best part about the price of eggs going down? Is it the economic benefit? Is it that you can buy more eggs? No, it's so Democrats can shut the fuck up about eggs. I've never been so happy about eggs. So they're not mentioning eggs? Oh, thank God. Thank God. Because it was the one thing they understood. Eggs are up. Eggs are up. What about those eggs? What has Trump done about the eggs? Now that the eggs are down, they just sort of go quiet about the eggs. But they do have new words. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's something surprising and awesome. According to Interesting Engineering, a U.S. company has made a drone battery, so a battery for their drone, that can last 3 hours, and it doesn't use any of the minerals that we get from China. So it doesn't have there's no nickel, manganese, cobalt, or graphite. And it can go 86 miles an hour. It's a San Jose based company called Lyten, Lyten. Remember, I keep asking, are there any American companies making drones? And I think that maybe the reason we didn't have them before is because drones were more of a personal hobby kind of a product, and there wasn't a market for our higher costs of manufacturing, which I assume. So it didn't make sense to go into the drone making business because you couldn't really meet the quality and the price of the Chinese drones. But as soon as it becomes a critical military need, we're talking about more expensive drones. And suddenly, you could get really, really rich making drones. So I'll bet you there are quite a few drone startup companies. I don't know. But their battery is lithium sulfur. And apparently it's ready to go. It's not. It's not hypothetical. It's here and it's ready to go. So this suggests an interesting possibility. We kind of assume that the way we get some, let's say, economic and security comfort with the fact that China has all these critical things we need, it could be that instead of mining our own critical things, we will innovate so we don't need them. So, what if we just stop needing these critical minerals? I mean, obviously, we still need them for phones and other electronics, but would it be impossible to innovate so that we just don't need those mines at all? Maybe. What about pharmaceuticals? Is it possible, especially with AI coming, that the AI will say, you don't need those pills? They're not working. Here's what you need. It'll solve all your problems. And by the way, China doesn't have a monopoly on this stuff. Maybe. So the decoupling from China could be from innovation, not because we figure out a different way to get stuff. Possible. In related news, Toyota is planning to launch an EV with a 745-mile range. That's about double what a lot of the EVs have, but it's way more than even the biggest one right now. And you'll be able to charge it in 10 minutes. So I'd kind of stopped reporting on all the battery innovations because it was boring and there were too many of them and they were going to take 10 to 15 years to actually be in any products. But apparently these are going to be in products really soon. So this is fully developed. Recharge in 10 minutes. And Harvard researchers say that the batteries could last up to 30 years. So 745-mile range, 10 minutes to charge it up, and the battery lasts 30 years. Not bad, Toyota. And it raises the bar for Tesla, doesn't it? Well, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, he's agreed with Elon Musk on the value of robots, humanoid robots. I think Elon Musk said at the high end, the robot market could be $50 trillion. And that's what Jensen Huang says. He says it could be a $50 trillion industry because the world is short of workers and there's a declining birth rate. And he thinks the first use will be in manufacturing. So people keep asking me, Scott, how do I plan my future in the robot world? And I don't know the answer to that because I'm definitely not smart enough to peer into the future and see what all that robot business is going to bring. But I'll give you kind of a general advice, which is I think the economic value of doing stuff, carrying things from here to there and just doing stuff is going to drop to zero because the robots will do it. But the value of owning stuff might be retained because robots can't own anything. So if you own a hotel and people want to stay at it, as long as there's still some people around, that might be worth something. If you own robots, maybe the model will be that individuals can own a dozen robots and then the robots just go to work for you. That's what the new Teslas will be able to do soon. Very soon, you'll be able to park your Tesla on the curb, and if anybody wants a auto taxi, they can just call it on their app, and your car will drive to them and make some money while you're asleep. So That's a case of owning something instead of doing something. So just think in those terms. So to think of something that a robot can't do, let's say, I don't know, there's some things where you just need people, but they tend not to be the highest paying jobs. All right, but let me give you a counterpoint. All right, the counterpoint. Mario Nawfal on X is arguing that radiologists started using AI because it's way faster, to look at what do they look at? Imaging. So once you do some imaging, the radiologist has to look at it and say, "Oh, this is bigger than it should be." But apparently, that was a laborious process where they literally had to measure the size of stuff. So they would say, "Oh, this looks like it's a little bit bigger than it should be." And now the AI can do that. But instead of replacing radiologists, it just became a tool for radiologists. Now, how many of you remember the dawn of the computer era where the smart people said it was going to make paper obsolete? Paper. And then you waited for a paper to become obsolete, and people just kept using paper. In fact, since it was easier to make documents and you couldn't carry your computer to meetings for at least for a while, you'd bring paper. Now, I haven't been in the real world business for a while. Is it still true that if you go to a meeting, people are going to have paper with them? Or has that now been completely replaced with bring your laptop? Is there anybody still in the business world? But here's the thing. I think it was 40 years ago. It was maybe 40 years ago that we thought paper would go away. I have not bought any less paper in 40 years. So, but now it's a mix of paper and laptops. I think depending on the company, it would be embarrassing to have paper. Oh, people don't even go to the meetings in person. They do it remotely. Paper took a hit because of the pandemic, you think? You use both? All right. So, but my only point, it's not really about paper. It's about we're not really good at estimating what's going to go away. Do you remember when television was invented? I'm old enough to basically remember when televisions were introduced into the living room, and all the smart people said, "Well, radio's dead." But radio didn't die. It just moved into your car and then became, talk radio for politics and Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that. We're really, really bad at estimating what's going to go away. We're a little bit better at estimating what's going to arrive, but it doesn't replace things as quickly as cars and horse and buggy. So for every example where something did obviously replace something, like cell phones did obviously replace pretty much the bulk of wired phones, at least in terms of usage. We'll see. So that's a counterpoint. That maybe humans will just use the AI, but you still need the human. How about a counter to the counterpoint? All right. Counter to the counterpoint. I saw Greg Eisenberg on X. He's saying that Microsoft just terminated 7,000 employees because AI couldn't do their jobs. But would you like a counterpoint to the counterpoint of the counterpoint? Somebody named Incognito John 23 said that's misleading because the employee terminations are really based on a merger where they just had too many employees and not based on AI. So watch out for your fake news about AI. And would you like a counter to the counter to the counter to the counterpoint? All right, well, I have one. So, according to Futurism, there was a company that wanted to be the darling of OpenAI and be the first ones to replace its marketing and customer service with AI. So, I guess they've been trying to do that since OpenAI and ChatGPT got good enough to try. And they're now giving up on that because they found that AI did not make their customers happy. It was cheaper because they did get rid of the human employees, but apparently their efforts to automate marketing and customer service didn't work out. It's a financial tech startup, so they're going to basically reverse it and put humans back into it. Now, imagine if you were calling some company and you had a problem. How many times is your problem something that they've heard of before? In my case, it's never. I can't think of a single time I've ever called customer support and they'd ever even heard of my problem. Every time I've had to call, which is many, many times, like most of you, the person who takes the call has never heard of what my problem is, and they have to figure it out like they're starting from scratch. And then they've got to talk to people, and they've got to look at their notes, and you've got to try things, and you've got to reboot. But never is it something that they've seen before. Now, why? I don't know. Who knows? Just too many different situations. But imagine if you got an AI and the AI was trying to figure out how to solve a problem that nobody had ever seen before. How well would it do? Since it's only trained on things it's seen before, could it really figure out a new thing that, would its pattern recognition be enough? If it didn't work for the humans, and the humans would be, highly trained. So imagine how frustrated you would be if you couldn't talk to a human and you also couldn't get a solution. You would be insane. Your brain would be on fire. At least if you can talk to a human, you feel like you've gotten past the first, the first barrier. Like, okay, I'm talking to a human, and this human needs to make me happy because their pay depends on it. But the AI doesn't get paid. So the AI doesn't really feel what you feel. It's not really on your side. It's just doing things by patterns. But if you've got a customer service person and you know that they're measured by their ability to quickly satisfy you, and there might even be somebody listening to the call, you at least feel like they're trying hard to solve your problem. So that's my counterpoint to AI taking all the jobs. So look at it, it's almost like ridiculously hard to predict what's coming. So that's a problem. Well, there's a group that says that robots and AI already have free will. Do you know how they decided that AI has free will already? They changed the definition of free will. Okay, so here's their definition of free will. So the following conditions have to be met, and this comes from NeuroEdge. It's based on a new study published in the Journal of AI and Ethics. So they say that AI has free will if it meets the following conditions. And some of you are going to say, yeah, that's the same with humans, right? It should be. So it should be the same standard as with humans. All right, condition number 1, it has goals and purposes. Check. Yeah, it does have goals and purposes because you just program those in there. It has genuine alternatives, meaning that it can choose from different options. Check. It could definitely do that. What good would it be if it couldn't do that? and has the capacity to control actions based on those intentions. Check. It can do all those things. Do you know what all those things are collectively? Cause and effect. It's just cause and effect. So if you define free will to be identical to cause and effect, well, sure. Okay, now your AI has free will, but it doesn't mean a thing. It's just cause and effect. So I know that's making half of you crazy, but think about it. All right. Let's talk about Trump and stuff. But first, we'll talk about RFK. So RFK Jr. is going after pesticides in food, and I guess he's got some report that's coming. And the pesticides he's targeting, and I assume that the report would have to support that, or he wouldn't keep targeting, would be glyphosate and atrazine. And he thinks those are toxins. Now, Trump officials are reviewing it, but no decisions have been made. Farm groups are against it because it would lower yields, of course. But here's what I didn't know. Apparently, the European Union still allows glyphosate. I swear I've heard 1,000 times that they don't allow glyphosate in Europe, but apparently they do. However, the other one, atrazine, is not allowed in the European Union, but it is allowed in America. So we'll see. We'll see if we end up banning both, or maybe we just match Europe and ban the one. We'll see. But I do like the fact that every time RFK Jr. has an idea, his critics go crazy and they say, but, you've got to look at the science. And then every time he's looking at something, he says, well, that's what we're doing. We commissioned a study, or we put together a meta study, or we're looking at the science every time. He doesn't sometimes look at the science and sometimes guess. What do his critics think he's doing? Do they think he's guessing? He made it very clear that he's all about the science, and he's going to show us his work, and other scientists will get to look at it, and they'll have plenty of time to say this is good science or bad science, or to add some more science. But it's amazing to me that his critics have decided that sometimes he's going to use the science and sometimes he's just going to make shit up. That's not going to happen. He's going to go with the science every single time. Now, the science might be wrong, but he's not going to ignore the science. That's not going to start happening all of a sudden. Anyway, I guess President Trump got to meet the new Syrian president, who not too long ago had a $10 million bounty on his head for being a terrorist. But now he's reformed, because, terrorists sometimes reform. It might be the first time it's ever happened. But he met the Syrian president, not in Syria, but in Saudi Arabia. And wasn't the longest meeting in the world, but the crown prince of Saudi Arabia and Turkey's Erdogan joined by phone. And it looks like the people who are on our side are trying to rehabilitate this guy, reputationally, so that we could work with him. And the idea is that Trump is going to remove his sanctions, which is something Syria desperately needs. And the government of Syria is going to take some steps to meet U.S. demands, and that would include arresting militants and also having relations with Israel, positive relations with Israel. And they've said yes to those. So, I mean, if he's a reformed terrorist, he's doing a real good job of it. Yeah, I'm not close enough to the situation to know if this is all a good idea or the worst idea ever. But he's making a hell of a show of being a reformed guy who just wants things to work out. Israel said none of this will stop their military operations in southern Syria, because I guess there's still some bad guys in southern Syria that Israel's after. But Ollie London was reporting that what the U.S. wants them to do is to sign on to the Abraham Accords, including relations with Israel, to tell the foreign terrorists to leave Syria. Well, tell them. I mean, probably has to do more than tell them. Deport Palestinian terrorists. I don't know why you'd make a difference between one kind of terrorist and another. And help the U.S. fight against ISIS and assume responsibility for ISIS detention centers in northeast Syria. That all sounds kind of doable. And I think the Syrians plan to do it. So wouldn't that be amazing? It would be kind of phenomenal, I think, if Syria became a country we could work with out of what it's been. Now, I feel like it's way too early to be too optimistic about that, but everything we see looks good. Brett Baer is reporting that President Trump's strategy for the Middle East is, instead of talking about this big problem area that's full of terror and fighting and stuff. Did my light just went on again? Hold on. Come on. There we go. So Trump's reframe of the Middle East, you could call it a strategy, is to think of it as a commerce zone. So to make everybody think about money. So instead of thinking about war, how about think about making some money? And part of that is he's going there and making these gigantic deals. Some of them are about the Middle East, but a lot of them are about investing in the U.S. and just getting everybody financially entangled such that war just stops making sense. It makes more sense to, just build up your money. I think that makes a ton of sense. And it also is compatible with what I would say is Trump's strategy on Iran. So Trump has been adamant about not being a sucker and not being drawn into a war with Iran. But what are you going to do if they insist on building their nuclear facilities to the point where they can make a bomb in 10 minutes? Well, it appears that Trump's approach, and it's too early to know for sure because he hasn't taken violence off the table, but I would say that it would be so non-Trump to just attack Iran, because there's no way that's going to go great, either for Iran or the Middle East or anybody else. It would just be, another debacle. And I think Trump doesn't want that on his permanent record. Neither do we. So it looks like he's going to threaten Iran with complete economic destruction, which is, again, compatible with his reframing of the Middle East as an economic zone that everybody should be paying attention to, because he thinks the Middle East is growing like crazy too. It's I think they've got a fast population growth as well as economic growth. And it made me wonder, what exactly can you do to Iran that you haven't already done? And I guess the main thing is Iran is still shipping oil. And, of course, they're doing it sort of under the curtain or somewhat surreptitiously. But it's not like we can't figure out which ships are full of oil. I mean, we could watch them from above. So maybe all he's going to do is threaten them with complete economic collapse, which I think he could deliver. I think he could deliver that. It would probably take about 6 months. And that might be enough. But what I'm sure of is simply mindlessly attacking them militarily, it just doesn't feel like a good idea. I was worried, though, that there wasn't any other idea, because I was under the impression that the sanctions that we already have on Iran, must have been pretty brutal, and if that wasn't making a difference. But apparently brutal we haven't gotten to. So brutal sanctions are a whole other level, and apparently Trump is willing to go to that level to avoid a physical war and to get Iran on its side. But I also like the fact that as the Middle East is embracing Trump like crazy, I mean, they're really treating him like a superstar, at least the Saudis and the Qatar is. If he pulls together a yet more impressive Abraham Accord, where essentially everybody but Iran is on the same team, and they're all working together almost like a European Union, it's going to be harder and harder for Iran to have any bad intentions. They're just going to want to. They're going to want to have to play along, I think, at some point. So everything about this seems like it's heading in the right direction, but of course, it's a very unpredictable area, so you never know. So I guess Trump is in Qatar already. He's already headed there, and Qatar is putting out the red carpet very much like the Saudis. They had the horses, and the jets were accompanying Air Force One in, and they're going all the way. But I'm now going to change my opinion about the gift of the Qatari airplane that Trump said he would accept. That would be the new Air Force One, or at least one of the two Air Force Ones. My first thought was I don't like anything about it, because it looks like it's going to influence him. And anything that even indirectly influences the president while he's got to negotiate with these same countries just feels like a bad idea. And then there's the look of it. So it would be an easy attack vector for his enemies. Oh, you just love the dictators or whatever. You're just doing it for your own benefit, whatever. And then it didn't really make sense to me, because if the real thing that takes time is taking an ordinary jet and turning it into Air Force One. My understanding is that Boeing already has the frames. The hard part? The hard part's over. Well, no, the easy part's over, which is building sort of a generic airplane. The reason we don't have Air Force One for another 7 to 10 years is that's how long it would take to build it out so it's an Air Force One, because it has all these, defensive things that you've never heard of, and it's got basically every part of it is different from a normal plane when you get to the inside. So wouldn't that be exactly the same for the Qatari plane? The Qatari plane wouldn't be done until Trump left office. There's not even the slightest chance that it would be done before he leaves office. So my initial response had been, I'm uncomfortable with this Qatari plane thing. I was, still reserving a little bit of judgment. But then every time I heard Trump talk about it, he kept changing my mind. I don't know if any of you had this experience. But when I just read about it as a news report, I think, oh, this is a terrible idea. No, don't take that plane. No, bad idea, bad idea. And then I'd see a clip of Trump saying, well, you'd have to be an idiot not to take a free airplane. And then I go, okay, well, that's pretty persuasive. Why wouldn't you take a free airplane? And then he says, it's a reward for us doing a good job. And I'm like, damn it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop convincing me it's a good idea to take this airplane. So here's my current view. And it's not that it's a good idea to take the airplane. And it's not that it's a bad idea to take the airplane. I was in the wrong frame. So I changed my frame. He is there to persuade, right? He's persuading them to make deals. He's a salesman. He wants to reframe the whole area. This is a persuasion trip. If you allow yourself to move away from the commerce and the gift and sort of the surfacey story, let's get down to persuasion. If the royal family of Qatar offers you a very valuable gift before you negotiate with them, should you say yes or no? You should say yes, because you want to show them the respect that the gift requires. Now, I think Trump knows that other people can kill this deal, such as Congress, such as public opinion, such as it's so politically bad that you can't do it. Trump can be the good cop here. I think he's just showing complete respect to Qatar because he's going into some difficult negotiations, which are going to get into some hard stuff, like what the fuck are you doing with Hamas? And he doesn't want to start that with, you know, essentially being rude and turning down a gift that seems to make sense on the surface to him. So I'm looking at this as exactly correct persuasion, which is first you say yes, then you say the Qataris are awesome for even offering it in the first place, and you say you're all in, and anybody who says this is a bad idea is just wrong. Why wouldn't you take a free gift from these awesome Qataris who are our good friends? Now, are they our good friends? Well, some would say that they're playing both sides of the street. Sometimes they're our friends. Sometimes they seem to be supporting Hamas. I don't know the truth of either of those things. But I do know that turning down that gift would have looked like a persuasion mistake. And if you stay in the persuasion frame, which is the right frame for the entire trip, he played it right. Now, do I want Congress to figure out a way to deny him the plane? Yes, I do. I want Congress to deny it. I do not want that plane. And I think the plane would be a huge mistake. And I think on some level, Trump probably knows it. He probably knows it. But he's playing it right. All right. Apparently, Putin has now said he wants Trump to join him and Zelensky in Turkey to talk about the potential end to that war. And Caitlin Collins is reporting for CNN that Trump says that he hasn't decided to go there, but he said, quote, about Putin, he would like me to be there. That's a possibility. That doesn't mean I wouldn't do it to save a lot of lives and come back. I don't know that he would be there if I'm not there. So do you remember when the Democrats told us that Trump was being considered like the laughingstock of the international community? Does anybody remember that? And then Keir Starmer comes over and he's like Trump's best friend. And then he goes to the Middle East and he's treated like a god. And then Putin says, I can't even have this meeting without you. Where's the part where we've lost all of our respect in the world? and then China says, all right, let's do a deal. Where's all the part where Trump is embarrassing the United States? Does anybody see any of that? That was all bullshit. As I've told you many times, the world is a transactional place. They don't care about how much respect they have for somebody. They care about what can you do for me. And they're watching Trump be a man of action, a man who can make things happen. And they're thinking, well, could he make things happen for us? Because we need some things, like the end of the war, like the Abraham Accords, like getting along, like getting rid of the terrorists. They're things we need. And Trump is a man of action, and he apparently can make stuff happen. things that America needs and things that we need too. So they're treating him like the most important person in the world because he's the most important person in the world. So I don't know what the odds are that the Ukrainian thing will work out. Uh, it's hard to be optimistic about it, but maybe. I mean, maybe. So the fact that that the international community is basically fighting over his time, because I think he was going to go to the UAE or something, so it would take away from some of their time. So I don't know what he's going to do, but I guess Marco Rubio, at the very least, Marco Rubio is going to the Turkey meeting with Russia. So we'll see what comes of that. There's a report in the New York Times that a small company with ties to China wants to buy $300 million worth of Trump's meme coins, his crypto. Now, this small company with ties to China has never made any money, but somehow they mysteriously have $300 million from some kind of stock transaction. And of all the things in the world that they could put their $300 million into, they've decided that their best play is a Trump meme coin. Does anything sound sketchy about that? Everything. Everything about that sounds sketchy. I'm going to wait for David Sachs to weigh in. Here's what I don't expect. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's take that money from that small company with ties to China that miraculously has $300 million and nothing better to spend it on than meme coins. All right. Let me say as clearly as possible, because I know this is going to come up. I am never going to say that Trump's crypto plays that are things that are good for Trump and the Trump family. I will never be in favor of that. Right? I will never back him on any crypto stuff. If the Democrats say, "Oh, this is terrible," I'm going to say, "Well, there's an opinion." If anybody wants to say, "But Scott, is it some kind of 4D chess?" Nope. I don't see any 4D chess. It looks like it's stuff that was designed to be good for Trump, and I'm not going to defend it even 1 second. So I'm completely not in favor of any of the weird crypto stuff, but I also don't understand it completely. I don't believe if I did understand it completely, it would change my mind one bit. So don't look to me to defend him on the crypto stuff. The only thing I can say is that it's transparent. That doesn't give you much. It just looks sketchy as all hell to me. But it seems to be legal as far as I know. Well, how many times have I told you that when people argue with analogies, it's because they don't have an argument? You've heard me say that a number of times, right? Here's a good example. I think it was on the 5 that whoever the Democrat person was who was sitting in that day was making an analogy between Trump doing business in the Middle East and doing licensing deals where the Trump name was put on hotels. And the argument was, well, how's that different than the Biden crime family? If you thought the Biden crime family was bad, why don't you? Yeah, it was Maria. What's her last name? Was it Harf? You'll give me the right name in the comments in a minute. But if you were complaining about the Biden crime family, why wouldn't you complain about Trump, benefiting from his time in office? So Harf, Maria Harf, I guess, was the person on the 5, and of course, Greg Gutfeld jumped all over it. They didn't have quite enough time for him to completely destroy her, but the That is the worst analogy I've ever seen in my life. How do you compare Hunter Biden taking a diamond from the Chinese spy chief that nobody knew about, totally secret, while he's working all these deals and violating FARA, violating the law, FARA, and is, clearly just making money and putting it into secret accounts and having all these secret accounts. How do you compare that to a fully transparent business as usual deal where Trump's name is on the tower, like this gigantic Trump name? So nobody's hiding anything. Now, I'm also uncomfortable with the Trump business, benefiting from the fact that Trump may have some good feelings in other countries, so they want to put his name on buildings. It's not the greatest thing for the country, but you can't compare it to something that is just flat out illegal. Something that's completely legal and completely transparent, nobody's hiding anything. It's business as usual for the Trump business to license their name to appropriate projects. So remember, every time you see an analogy as an argument, the reason people use analogies for an argument is because they don't have an argument. If they had an argument, they would say, well, what he's doing is illegal. Oh, okay. Well, that's an argument. Now, that's not the case in this case. But if you have to say, but what about this analogy to this thing that is illegal? You don't have any argument. Yeah, that's in my book, Loser Think. You're right. Well, inflation has reached its lowest since 2021. And I know that the coverage seems to be pretending that the tariff stuff didn't make any difference. But there's a timing problem here. Whatever is driving the current inflation probably is what has happened recently, but not as recently as the tariff stuff. So if, in fact, the disruption from all the tariff threats and negotiations, if they have an effect on prices, that would still be ahead of us. So it would be incorrect, in my opinion, to say Trump was right, that he could do tariffs, and at the same time, inflation would not go up. It might be true. It might be true. Because one of the things I've learned about inflation since my time as an economics major in college was that it seems that nobody understands inflation. On one hand, it seems obvious. If you print more money, you have more inflation. I got it. All right. Yes, got it. Totally understand that. But why can't anybody predict it? Why are the experts so bad at predicting inflation? And do you remember stagflation? I mean, that kind of caught people off guard. How can you have stagflation? And then the other thing we don't understand is it possible that inflation is lower because the economic activity got depressed? Because when you're not selling much, you're not raising prices. So is it good news? Or is it an indication that demand has fallen off? I don't trust anything about inflation numbers when everything is roiling the way it is now. There are too many variables in play. But the only thing I want to warn you about is if you're pairing these two things and saying, oh, inflation is low at the same time as tariff activity is high, therefore, the tariff activity has nothing to do with inflation, that would be incorrect. There's probably just a timing problem or other variables that are not fully explored. Well, meanwhile, James Carville is still trying to get the Democrats to use the right words, and he's added a few words that he thinks are dumb for Democrats to use. He says, stop using equity and use equality instead. Stop saying oligarch because nobody knows what it means. So stop with your communities. Stop having communities like LGBTQ plus. He goes, how about just everybody's people? Stop doing communities and stop doing intersectionality. Um, and he said about oligarch, he goes, this is another really stupid word, oligarch. Who in the F knows what an oligarch is? Now, I would add to James Carville's complaints, how many people know what habeas corpus is? Now, habeas corpus gets to due process for somebody who's locked up, but I'm going to go even further. How many Democrats could define due process? Most of us are news junkies, or you wouldn't be watching this podcast. So if you're a news junkie, of course you know what due process is. Of course you do. You might even know what habeas corpus is. But how many average Democrats could define either of those terms? There's something about the Democrats that is so disconnected from what the real world is. It's just hilarious. But I got a question for you. Sometimes I can't tell my own influence. Is it my imagination, or was I the first person to say that the oligarch term was ridiculous because the Democrats don't know what an oligarch is? Was I the first? Because I feel like I was, and then it just was everywhere. And what I wondered was, would that have happened on its own? Because the oligarch thing was kind of cooking along for a while, and nobody was saying anything like, we don't know what an oligarch is, until I said it. And then right after I said it, people started saying it. Was that me? Now, that's a genuine question because I have no way to know. But if you know somebody else who does what I do, talk about the news, was there anybody who beat me to it? Because in that case, it was probably them. But I'm not aware of it. So, and I don't know that everybody would have hit that same idea that that the world doesn't know what an oligarch is. I don't know how obvious that was until I pointed it out. So, anyway, here's what else I would add to it. Have you noticed that the Democrats, when they talk about Trump's first 112 days or whatever it is, they say that it's catastrophic. So they say, well, Trump so far has been catastrophic. And I say to myself, wait, what? What was catastrophic? I wake up every day and nothing really catastrophic is happening to me. I mean, at least from politics. Are any of you experiencing anything catastrophic? Is it the lower inflation? Is it the border being protected? Is it the deals he's making on tariffs and other things? Is it the potential that he might end some wars? Is it the Houthis stopped bombing us? What exactly is the catastrophic part? Is it that there was one MS-13, accused MS-13 guy, who was a Maryland dad who didn't get his due process? Is that the catastrophic part? But when you hear anybody try to add anything to it, they talk about how he's, becoming a strong man, or he's trying to become an authoritarian. To which I say, hasn't he obeyed the courts so far? Is there a court case or a court order that's just being ignored? Because if he's simply doing things which are pushing the envelope, but then the courts are deciding, what he can get away with and what he can't, that's not okay. So where is the catastrophic part? So I think the Democrats need to get rid of catastrophic and chaos because they can't define either one, and they don't give any examples. All right, I'm going to go contrarian on a Biden story. So we're learning now that the reason George Clooney was so alarmed that Biden's brain wasn't working is that when he met Biden, Biden didn't recognize George Clooney. Now, on one hand, you would say, oh my God, he's the most recognizable actor. Of course, anybody would recognize George Clooney. On the other hand, has anybody noticed that George Clooney doesn't look like George Clooney anymore? I don't know what's going on, and I don't know if it's weight loss or because he changed his hair or whatever, but to me, George Clooney doesn't look as much like George Clooney as he used to. Do you think that that can be part of the story? Do you think it's 100% that Biden wasn't very sharp? Because, he probably knew he was going to run into George Clooney. Somebody probably told him. Or is it possible that he looked right at him and he didn't recognize George Clooney because he doesn't look the same as he did even a year ago? Because he doesn't look the same as he did even a year ago. Now, I don't know why. It could be it's because he's doing something for a play or something. But I'm not 100% sure that was a Biden problem. I could imagine it happening to me. That's why I'm being a little flexible on that one. But PBS News had a video in which a reporter was asking Chuck Schumer this question. You said in June of last year that in my dealings with President Biden, I found him to be in command and impressive. Were you being straight with the American public? And Schumer's answer was, we're just looking forward. Now, that sounds a lot like a confession, doesn't it? We're just looking forward. He's completely surrendered to the idea that he can't keep up the charade, that he wasn't aware that Biden was mentally incapable. It just looks like he just gave up and said, we're just looking forward. So you can take that win. So we'll take the win. According to Resist the Mainstream, I don't know who they are, but they're claiming that Biden's got a prostate nodule that was discovered. And that nodule had some basal cell carcinoma. These are all words that are trying to say cancer, but not saying the actual word. And then a biopsy confirmed that it was basal cell carcinoma. And then they say that all cancerous tissue was successfully removed, according to Fox News. Now, how did they do that without surgery? Do you believe that he had a cancerous nodule on his prostate and it was 100% removed without surgery? Or that he had surgery and we didn't hear about it? There's something about this story that doesn't add up. I'm just saying. You may know political commentator Mark Halperin, who I consider, I've been watching him for a while. He's got a very good podcast, Two Wire, I think it's called. And he always seems like a straight shooter, meaning that he's not the spin guy. I can't even tell, honestly, it's hard to tell what political view he favors. He's that balanced. But according to him, when he talks about Fetterman, because there are stories that Fetterman has been a little erratic. We don't know what that means exactly. But Halperin said, quote, but I can tell you behind the scenes, and, Halperin has really good sources. He goes, behind the scenes, Fetterman's behavior warrants the commentary it's gotten plus more. I can tell you that. So Fetterman is, in fact, acting in a way that I think from a purely health perspective is concerning. So if you thought you saw it publicly, well, you were. It was showing up. Now, I hope he gets the help that he needs, because it could be anything. Could be anything from, well, it could be anything. I'll just say I would treat this as a health problem, and I'll just hope he gets better. Um, According to 404 Media, the Republicans are trying to put into their big, beautiful budget bill AI regulations, a ban on states regulating AI for 10 years. Because I guess states could do that if they wanted to, and that would be very bad. But I think it's not just states, but it's about anybody. So, so the Republicans want AI to live free and do what it can do, capitalism wise. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but it's in there. Remember Senator Tillis? He apparently came out against Trump's plan to slash drug prices with his executive order. What? What? How in the world could you be a Republican senator and be against it? And he calls the most favored nations policy, that's where we get the best price that any other country gets, short-sighted and unsustainable. Really? Is short-sighted and unsustainable? Really? It's not just a gigantic financial advantage for senior citizens especially. No, it's short-sighted and unsustainable. Now, do you trust him anymore? I mean, you need a better argument than that for me to think that you're not being influenced by something or someone. So, any trust you had in Senator Tillis, I think you should remove. Now, if he has a good argument that for some miraculous reason he's the only one who thought of it, I'm open to it. Yeah, let's hear a good argument. But that's not an argument, short-sighted and unsustainable. You're going to need a little bit more than that. Now, maybe there is a little bit more than that, and I haven't seen it. But if nobody else is picking up on his argument, I think you just can't trust him on this or anything else. I mean, it feels like it's just so over the top in obviously not serving the people. So that's what it feels like. According to the Daily Wire, there's some advocates for a remittance tax. So when all the illegal migrants send money back to Mexico, there's, I guess, $86 billion went back in 2023. There's the big, beautiful bill includes a 5% remittance tax. So the big, beautiful bill is not approved yet, but it might be. And that would be some extra free money. I mean, it's not going to change the total debt situation. It's not that big, but it does feel like we should get something. It feels like a fair thing to tax, but maybe I think that because it's not me. So 5% potential tax. I also wonder how much of that money that's being sent back is trackable. Do you think it's trackable? I feel like they find ways to send money that are, sort of not trackable, but I don't know the details. Well, there's a Trump-appointed judge who says it's okay for Trump to use the Alien Enemies Act to deport those Venezuelan gangs that trend to Aragua. That's according to Blaze Media. But the judge says that the administration has to give them 21 days of notice. How does that work? Do you arrest them in a big operation and then say, wait right here for 21 days? Or can you put them in jail? and and then the 21 days starts. I don't know if this is helping as much as it looks like. And I also don't know if this is the final say. But at the moment, at least there's one judge who says that Trump can keep doing these deportations. So I think that's what the administration will do. Well, I was watching some video of Josh Hawley going after the CEO of Allstate Insurance. And apparently there are some whistleblowers. Now, you can't always trust the whistleblowers because remember, whistleblowers sometimes are brave heroes telling us what we need to know. Sometimes they're disgruntled employees who maybe got fired for a good reason, but that's not the way they're going to tell it. So you have to be careful about your whistleblowers. But there are a couple of whistleblowers who say that Allstate essentially ordered them to downgrade their estimates of how much they should pay people for the damage to their homes. Now, if that's true, and essentially they were being asked to lie because the evaluators, what would they be called? What's the name of those people? The people who look at your house and decide how much insurance you're going to get. Anyway, so those people say that they would do their work, and then the bosses would say, well, why don't you change that number so that we give them less money? Adjusters, thank you, the adjusters. So if it's true that Allstate was leaning on the adjusters to literally lie because it was good for profit, that's a pretty big problem. And I think Josh Hawley is doing good work to expose that. In related news, another insurance company that I always confuse with Allstate, State Farm, because they both have state in the name. They've requested and been granted a 17% premium increase in California, but they still won't cover wildfires. And the 17% is just the first part of what they want. They want 30%. So insurance companies are not doing great. I guess it's better that they exist than they don't, but they're not really helping California too much, and they're starting to look more like the enemy than the safety. In some technology news, according to Engineering and Technology, there's an electrolysis technique that now can convert seawater directly into hydrogen without desalinating it first. Now, apparently, it is so efficient that it can be, and it looks like it can be ramped up to industrial scale, but so efficient that you can use solar power to create the hydrogen. So in theory, if you're a place that's near seawater and you get a lot of sun, you can just put this new industrial scale production thing there, and it will just keep running and create a bunch of hydrogen that is worth more than the cost of the installation. Now that would be pretty amazing, actually. So I don't know if this is the thing that will change the world, but every time I see something like this, I think, man, you really can't predict where anything is going. Because if you can simply put up some solar panels and dip a hose in the ocean, and suddenly you're making hydrogen forever, that's kind of awesome. It's kind of awesome. So it looks like that's coming. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I got for today. It looks like mostly good news, and watching Trump do his thing in the Middle East is awesome. So let's keep an eye on that. But I'm going to talk privately to the subscribers on Locals. And the rest of you, thanks for joining, and I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow morning, because I never rest. Neither should you. Locals supporters, coming at you in 30 seconds private.